with all of these folks that have done extraordinary things during the pandemic as well. So we're going to learn, today is really about you and about some advice for you as composers, as musicians, from people that are, walking it every day in really extraordinary ways. So I want to, turn that over to them, but I thought, I've seen too many composer panels where we don't play music. And so I wanted to start with a little bit of music from each one of them, just as a way of putting some things in context. So their bios are all on the web. You can pull up the QR link and find out all about them. And I know many of you have been listening and researching and doing lots of listening in the last couple weeks particularly. So I hope that you've familiarized yourself with their music. But I've asked them to just submit a little bit of music for us to play. And I'll just go in the order that I have it on my computer. So I think first up is Carlos Simon, and Carlos is to my right. There we are. Welcome, Carlos. Thank you. Carlos, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what this is?
Yeah. Go ahead. It needs some explanation. So it is an excerpt from my latest opera called It All Falls Down, which is premiering now, actually, at the Kennedy Center. It's commissioned by the Washington National Opera. And it's the story of a father-son relationship where two preachers. His father is a very prominent African-American preacher who's passing down his church to his son, but his son is gay, and he's closeted. He comes out to his father and to the congregation along the same time as the same-sex marriage bill happens. And this particular excerpt is, the son asking a question to his father along with the congregation, and his mother, who is played by Janae Bridges. The son is Christian Mark Gibbs, and the father is Alfred Walker. So it's a very short clip. It's a short excerpt.
So next up is Kevin Day, who is to my left. Welcome, Kevin Day.
Hey, everyone. The excerpt you're going to hear is from one of my recent works called Concerto for Wind Ensemble. And this is in part of a collaboration between 23 universities from across the U.S. and in the country of Australia as well. And the movement you're going to hear is entitled Riff, which is based on my my time playing as a jazz pianist in many groups, and so hope you enjoy it.
Next up to my immediate left, Mr. Omar Thomas.
Hello. All right, so I actually wanted to present to you some work from my big band life. So this is a piece called Montague Crest that I was commissioned to write about 7 years ago as a part of a larger Romeo and Juliet project that was spearheaded by the University of Northern Colorado, Jazz Lab 1. They basically commissioned a number of different composers to tell different aspects of the story of Romeo and Juliet under the rules that we couldn't hear each other's music and couldn't be referential to any other Romeo and Juliet music. And then they put it all together in a suite and brought us to the concert where we heard the entire thing for the first time. And so they gave me the Romeo movement, and so that's what you're about to hear, Montague Crest.
All right, and our last composer before we get to Speedo is Valerie Coleman. We are thrilled to have you here with us. So when Valerie, when we first started talking about coming, she was going to be on her own. I was like, "Do you remember where Lincoln Theater was?" She said, "Sort of vaguely," because she was here quite a bit with us. She was here with Imani at one point, and spent a fair amount of time here.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because the next piece that's going to be played is performed by Imani Wins, and it was one of the earlier pieces that I wrote for the ensemble. Imani means faith in Swahili, and this piece, Umoja, is one of the principles of Kwanzaa, the first principle, and it stands for unity. And it is a work that we concertize for the better part of 2 decades. So we're gonna play a little bit of that.
Valerie Coleman on flute. All right, and lastly, we're so proud, Speedo, of being able to count you as an alum of the Hartt School. We are just so proud of that. And your artistry, I remember, if I can say, when I first heard it here, was one of those moments of, oh, this is going to be something. So it was really extraordinary. So thank you.
Thank you.
So tell us what you're going to sing.
As I said, my name is Speedo. I'm a bass baritone, and I have a unique voice in a situation where, like, I'm amongst such talented composers. So I'm on the other end, where at the moment I'm lucky enough at my age and point in my career to have a piece being composed for my voice, as well as an opera being recomposed for my voice. The piece I'm going to be playing for you today is from actually last week. I did a benefit concert. I closed the concert for this concert at the Metropolitan Opera. It was a benefit concert for Ukraine, and we ended with the last movement of the B9, Beethoven 9. And this is my little moment to shine.
We've had a handful of people join us here, actually a number of people join us. So I do want to welcome you all here now that we've settled and we've heard a little bit from all of our guest artists. I'm Gilda Lyons. I'm a composer and a vocalist, and I'm on the Hartt composition faculty. It's nice to meet anybody that I haven't met here. So I would love to just have this be an open conversation. Oftentimes we wait till the end to get questions from the audience, but I'd really love to see hands at any point that you have a question. I'm going to go first though, because I get to, because I'm up here. So everyone up here is a performer. And at Hartt, we encourage our composers not to just compose in theory, but compose in practice, right? To really hear their music and live it and perform, not just their own, but other people's music. And that's something that everybody here has experience with. So I would love to hear from everybody. How does your life as a performer affect the creative side of actually writing the music? And for Speedo, I would just shift that question into body, because living in body, how does your body being your instrument inform the voice, and how does the voice inform the body? Anybody?
I guess I'll start. So I grew up in the Pentecostal church, and I played organ in my dad's church. And so a lot of that experience is improvised, and I always try to keep that element of, question, how many of y'all have been in an African-American, predominantly black church, a Pentecostal church to be specific? All right. So you know how spontaneous the music is, how music really plays a part of, the worship and the spontaneous style. So I learned how to read a room. I learned how to improvise with the emotions, with the actions. And I always stay true to that in my compositions. So whenever I start writing music, I try to live with the concept, and then I improvise with that in my body and my psyche. So even though I don't play piano publicly anymore, it's still very much a part of the performance. When I improvise, it's a performance, and I try to record that as much as possible. So, and as I'm composing, I'm envisioning the performer perform it. Whatever it is, an orchestra, that I'm actually visualizing the conductor giving these cues and these types of things. So it's very much a part of, who I am still.
Well, I would say that performing is that critical part of my identity as a hybrid artist, meaning that when I'm on stage, the experience of exchanging energy with the audience and the having the honor and privilege to breathe through my instrument and to convey musical ideas of original compositions in the way that I know the other partners that I have on stage within a chamber music setting, for example. That kind of communication is unlike the compositional experience, but it is the other side of the coin. With the compositional experience, it's really an internal thing. And for me, my process is that I'm thinking of others. I'm thinking of how it appears that performer is on stage. I envision the stage. And I think that performing allows that kind of visualization to happen, which then informs the compositional process. I believe that music breathes, it lives. And to be able to perform it and live inside of that really is a front row seat and a privilege. So they go hand in hand.
So I got memified the other day, and it was kind of dope. And it said, Omar Thomas writes dope percussion parts. And that meant a lot to me. I'm not a percussionist. I'm a trombonist by trade. However, the clip that you heard was the UNC, Northern Colorado Jazz Lab one, but I have my own big band called the Omar Thomas Large Ensemble, and we have released 2 albums, and it would have been 3 had COVID not happened. So I am the person who not only writes for the ensemble, but I conduct the ensemble as well. And I won't have a concert unless I can have my all-star rhythm section in place. I just won't. I start with those cats. And if they can't do it, we move the whole gig, right? Because once the engine is running fine, then all I have to do is concern myself with the wind parts, right? And so my whole journey as a composer is to get the jazz world and the wind ensemble world, which is who I am, because of how I grew up in public school music education, to get them to speak to each other seamlessly. So when I'm writing my percussion parts for wind ensemble, I'm thinking about Mark Walker, Grammy Award-winning drummer over there in the drum set, and I'm thinking about Alex Brown at the piano, and I'm always trying to figure out how can I recreate that spontaneity and that energy in a way that is composed but still feels a bit spontaneous. It's the most difficult thing in the world, but I'm all of this to say I'm always thinking about the groove. Right? Especially as I'm moving, as I'm conducting the music, as Valerie just said, the music lives and breathes. So I need to live and breathe and move with it, and that's always in the forefront of my mind. That informs the length of my phrases, the shapes of my phrases, how the accompaniment responds to the phrases. I'm always thinking about dancing, groove, and rhythm. And so I'm just trying to be very conscious of that when I'm thinking about who's behind the ensemble and how they're driving and pushing the ensemble. Something needs to be on the end of 2. If the groove is on 3 and 4, how does everything else respond and react to that? And also, how do the wind players also play a role in that percussive groove? Because sometimes I might need to call on the wind players to reinforce what's happening in the back of the ensemble. So, as somebody who leads the ensemble, I'm always thinking about how all these elements coalesce and talk to each other without the label of genre, because that's so complicated and conflicting and can be very detrimental. That's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, so similarly to Carlos, I also grew up playing in a lot of churches as an organist and as a pianist. The other part was sort of my upbringing was I was also playing tuba and euphonium in the band. So it's like I would be playing in like middle school and high school weekdays outside marching and then doing the concert band, and then on the weekends I would go with my parents and travel to clubs or to different churches and play gospel music and jazz music. And I did this for a long time, where just these two worlds, like I had like the school like wind band and orchestra world, and then I had the jazz and gospel music I would do on the weekends. And so part of me, when I came to undergrad, my teacher knew that I had all this playing experience and was able to really help me to bring these worlds together. So a lot of my music is the fusion of all the things I knew growing up, from my parents, one being a hip hop producer, one being a gospel singer, and then playing through wind band and orchestra, and then getting into more contemporary things once I learned about just what composers were writing now. And my teacher just had me listen to a whole lot of music, because part of me being able to play all these instruments and be able to sort of switch is I was able to pick up things very quickly. So when I hear something, I can take what I hear and then be able to play the chords or be able to play the melodies that I hear pretty quickly. So part of me figuring out who I was as a composer, I think, was trying to figure out how to marry all of these different kinds of musical genres together into what I do. And so that's who I am. It's like my music is this combination of so many musical elements, both improvisatory and also through notation as well.
Wow, that's really awesome to hear all those stories and to hear from the composer's mouth, especially as I'm hearing their stories. I think of the fact that I, as a singer, on the opposite end, performing these pieces that these composers compose, I did not grow up. I grew up in the church. My mom's Pentecostal, but I was the kid sleeping in the pews. And I never sang in church. My mom sang in church, but she was horrible, and I let her know all the time as a kid. And I didn't actually start singing until I was like 14, 15 years old. And even then, it wasn't gospel or R&B or hip hop or anything like that. It was opera. Like I'm the purest. I'm actually more pure of an opera singer than probably most Caucasian opera singers. And the fact is, as I've gone through my career, I've dealt a lot with pushback from the African American community on the fact that I'm just a pure opera singer. And it's unheard of that someone who gets into music, especially classical music, doesn't have a background that is rooted in the African American music style. But I think that's also what makes me special. I sing everything, whether it be the spirituals that I learned later on in life, or the African American art songs that I've learned throughout college and through the teachers in my life, and now singing music by African American composers on the biggest stages in the world. I sing it in my voice, which is a pure operatic voice. And I think that's what gives me a special quality that maybe my peers who grew up around the church, which most, I would say, I've never met an African American opera singer who didn't grow up around the church or have some sort of church background. It sets me apart, and I look at it differently. And as far as how my voice is affected by my life, I mean, oh my gosh, I always envy instrumentalists to the fact of when something doesn't sound right with their instrument, they can tune it or get another one. And if I'm having a bad day, like if I wake up, like for instance, I woke up this morning and I realized that Connecticut is full of birch trees, and the thing that I'm most allergic to is birch trees, and my throat feels like it's been run through a garbage disposal, and there's nothing I can do about it other than drinking a ton of water and praying to whatever God I believe in. And that's something as a singer, like I hope all composers, I pray that all composers understand that every performance, every rehearsal is going to be different. We're lucky as singers if we get a magical performance where we're singing at like 90% of our voice. And sometimes we're lucky if we save 75% of our voice in a live happening performance. And I'm always appreciative of composers who are willing to adjust to the people in the room. And it's been a learning journey for me to experience living composers' music, from everything from Philip Glass to Terence Blanchard to now working with Courtney Bryan. I'm getting to work with these living composers from all different kinds of genres, and I find it amazing that I live in a time and I'm at a level of my career where I can actually experience that.
It's so beautiful, and it's a beautiful pivot into this conversation about collaboration. It's something that, I like the way that Speedo just said, talking about composers who will write for the trumpet in the room is what I say, right? You write for the instrument that you're writing for, and more than that, write for the human being that you're writing for, right? And Valerie, you also talked about that in your response initially, and about breathing in music. And can you speak to collaboration, everyone? Because collaboration is another central component of what everybody here is really working. Not just, I did a thing, now you respond, but deeper than that, like real true collaboration where we go to that next level. Can anybody jump in?
Okay, I guess I'll start since I'm starting. Always.
It's a rule now. Now it's a tradition.
Yeah, I have to write my pieces in collaboration with people, with the performers. I don't like writing in a vacuum at all. My instrument is piano, but I know enough about the other instruments to write for them, but not enough to know to really, really get the best performance out of a piece. So, if it's an orchestra piece, I'll send a violinist the violin parts, and they'll give me some feedback, because the strings are like the lifeblood of the orchestra, right? And so I always like sending my music to performers, and it doesn't always happen, but if there's a reading of a piece, that helps out a lot too. Mm-hmm. So in between the premiere, being able to hear a draft of the work in its state, that is so life-changing. And then it gives you the opportunity to change the piece, to revise, and to move things around and shift. And that has proven really successful for me. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't, because there isn't a lot of time. And oftentimes, if you're working with a large ensemble, there's money involved. But smaller chamber works, and if I'm writing an art song, something like that, I love working with the performers, and they can give me feedback that can help the piece, and I learn a lot from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to continue on that because I felt that in my spirit. There is nothing worse than having to submit the 100% final version the first time and not hearing it until the day of the performance and sitting in your seat being like, damn, well, I should have done that differently. But the concert's in 4 hours, and that does happen, and that really sucks. And I hope to not put myself in that situation ever again. Can you tell there's trauma there? But I feel like, speaking to collaboration, one of my favorite collaborative experiences was with the great educator and percussionist and composer Stefan Harris. Yeah. Love me some Stefan. And he, for a number of years, led the SF Jazz Collective, and then went on to the Manhattan School of Music to run the jazz program there. And he hired me to turn a number of his SF Jazz, I want to say sextet or septet pieces into full big band orchestrations. And so what I love about that situation is that I don't really have to compose per se. He's done all of the cool composition things. I just take them and make them bigger, And then he brought me to MSM, and I conducted a concert at Dizzy's at Lincoln Center of the MSM Jazz Orchestra, with him playing vibes, me conducting his orchestrations of the, that is the coolest thing ever. So that element of collaboration where you don't have to be 100% responsible for all of the creative things. You can take something that's already amazing and then do your thing to it, and then, and then have the person who actually created the cool thing be a part of that experience. I'm always texting him, when are we going to do something else? Because I just had so much fun in that experience. And so I don't do stuff like that often. I'm actually the composer who works in the cave, and the cave is very dark and damp and depressing, and it's a struggle. But you know, some things need to happen in the cave, and I mean, you either you know, what's the saying? I don't ever fail. I just learn. I feel like there's a lot of learning that happens in the cave. You learn a lot about yourself when you're in this isolated state for an extended period of time. But being able to switch it up and bring somebody else into the fold, or just reaching out to a friend and being like, hey, I can't hear this anymore. Does this completely suck? You know, I think that that's really meaningful. So I don't think there's anything I've done 100% myself without at least sending to a friend and just being like, can you help me out here because I can't hear anymore.
Yeah, kind of going with that. Over the last few years, I've had the chance to work with soloists on different, I guess, concertos for their instrument, and usually wind ensemble, though now beginning kind of to go into orchestra with that. And what's been really fascinating to me about collaborating with these different, very different individuals is just their own personalities, and just how, like, the way they play is kind of brought out through what their personality is. And a collaboration that I did a few years ago, actually right before COVID began, was with trumpet player Jens Lindemann, who used to play in the Canadian brass quintet years ago, and is just a really phenomenal player. Jens, if you know anything about Jens, is very charismatic. Jens is very very extroverted, very passionate, and he brings that to his playing with every fiber of his being, without exaggeration. So I had a chance to collaborate with him on a piece called Pyrotechnics, which ended up being this trumpet concerto with wind ensemble, and to see him take, you know, because I was trying to like write to cater to his strengths, but to see him take that and then like take things up an octave or do crazy things that I didn't even write, I was just like, that's Jens. He's going to take something up an octave or two, but it really, with each concerto I've written, even for the one that y'all heard with wind ensemble, it's based on the character of the person or with the group. And so I've really enjoyed that process of sort of getting to know the individual I'm working with or the group, and writing music that really plays to their strengths in a lot of ways.
Can I also say too, there's levels of this too, and depending on which setting. Concert music, yeah, you can get feedback and suggestions to change the piece, but generally there's a lot of oversight. You know, you're not going to say change the piece. But in opera and film, you have to be really open to feedback and criticism, especially with film.
I will say that didn't used to be so. It's changed a lot over the years, and also something I realized as I was lucky enough to work with, you know, Carlisle Floyd on one of his pieces when he was alive. I was able to work with John Adams on one of his pieces at the Met, and as well as I worked with Terence Blanchard in the production I just left at the Met, and is working with him on the future one at the Met next season. And the thing I realized with, like, for instance, when I first met Carlisle Floyd in his very old age, I had so much fear, and even the people working with me had so much fear of like everything has to be exactly the way that he wrote it. And so I had that old school mentality of that's the way it's supposed to be. And then when I did my first production of John Adams at the Met, I did Death of Klinghoffer, and it was the hardest music I've ever learned in my entire life. To this day, I mean, I've sung roles that are almost 50 times longer than the role that I sang, yet it took me 50 times longer to learn that role, and I never felt so uncomfortable. At the same time, like, I knew that in my mind, I felt it had to be just like Carlisle Floyd had to be perfect. That's what I was raised musically as a singer, that if some composer writes it this way, Mozart wrote exactly what he wanted you to sing. Don't deter, don't put portamentos when it's not written, do exactly what he says. And then I started working on Fire Shut Up My Bones, And Terence Blanchard, I wasn't actually originally supposed to be in the show. The part was written, the part that I sang was written for a tenor, baritone, and I'm a bass baritone. And then Terence decided that the year before the show happened that he wanted like a more fatherly, more regal voice, a lower voice. So he was starting to work with the late Arthur Woodley, who passed away like 6 months before the show started. So then they approached me about doing it, and I'll never forget when I got the role. He had not yet worked with Arthur Woodley to recompose it for his voice, and Arthur Woodley was one of the most famous Porgies that ever existed in the world. So he's a very low voice, and I looked at the piece, and I was like, oh my God, look at all these high notes, and it goes so fast. And I was like, but if you're gonna do the part, you have to do the way it's written. In Terence, knowing his style and the jazz style, I didn't even think that jazz is a lot of improvisation. I didn't think about that, and so I came into the first day rehearsal, and Yannick, the music director of the Met, was conducting it, and he was conducting it as written, which is very fast. And he got to my part, and I practiced this part for like 3-4 months, and I get to my rehearsal, and I realized that I can't do it that fast, and I started slowing down because I literally couldn't go from the leaps, the octaves with my voice, and Terence was like, he whispered something to Yannick, and Yannick's like, hey, Speedo, Terence says you want to try it slower, and I was like, can I? And he's like, sure. So I sang it slowly, and like literally, I think half the tempo that it was written, and all of a sudden, it was like a revelation to everybody in the room, like, oh! and he's like, we have to do the entire. It was a trio. We have to do the entire trio like half the speed, because now I see that with Speedo's voice, it's floated that way, and it was the first time in my life singing modern music that I was like, so I started asking more suggestions. Hey, could I like have this note longer? Can I have a rest here so I can breathe, so I can sing this note better? And he's like, sure, why not? Let's do that. And I was like, oh my God, really? And now I'm working with him in my next season in Champion, my first major role of my career, and I'm literally talking with him, one-on-one about, can we change this page? Can we change this phrase here? Can we put a climax here? And that's crazy it shattered my preconceptions on working with a composer. At the same time, there is a tradition that follows with that initially singers specifically will feel like they can't ask for anything. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to just transition a little bit into now some advice and some thoughts for the composer. So I'm going to do a speed round on 3 questions. So here's your speed round. What is the one thing in college that you wish you would have known that you know now?
Oh my gosh.
This is a speed round. Go.
Oh my God.
To not rely solely on your teachers for your artistic decisions. When you do that, that means that you're playing it safe from jump, and you're not taking risks that you need to in order to grow.
Save money. I swear, save money.
I would say absorb all the music that you can. Like, you're not at an age where you have to go to a library anymore and hope they have the CD. So like, absorb all of the music that you can, and also from one another as well.
I'd say you will miss most of the picture if you worry about money. Most of the picture. You can think about that. I mean, you can think about, okay, I don't want to explain it, but if you can, do I have to explain it? Should I explain it? Okay. Okay. I worried a lot about money, how I was going to make money as a composer. And, I missed a lot of opportunities to work with people just because it didn't pay or whatever. And it really hindered my growth as a composer. School is about building relationships. It's about working with other people. And if you are worried about money or having to take a job that you don't really like, and you are sacrificing, writing because of this, then you miss opportunities. So that's the explanation.
Anything else?
You still here? I'm trying to think.
This is the guy that's written over 200 pieces. So.
So I would say, like, what I would say would be getting out of your comfort zone can sometimes lead to some really wonderful connections. And being an introvert, the introvert that I was, where I was very scared to talk and interact with people, the times where I took a leap of faith and, you know, tried to go to things and try to meet people and really, you know, put myself out there led to some of the most important work that I've been doing for the last 5 years or so. So I would say don't be afraid to put yourself out there and to get out of your comfort zone, because it could lead to something really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so question 2, it's a short 2-part question. Number 1, what are your 3 biggest influences? So usually that question is, which composers do you most admire and do you model your music after? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what are your 3 biggest influences in your performing or your composing career? And number 2, who are you listening to now? And who are you excited about as a listener? And I, you know, Speedo, I find your comment interesting about, you know, never having grown up the way you do as a pure opera singer, right? Because I remember going to John Corigliano's house when we had him here years ago, and we were doing Mr. Tambourine Man, course lyrics by Bob Dylan, right? So I got to his apartment and I said, "So, you know, you got this from Dylan?" He's like, "I've never heard him sing." And I said, "No. How can you be, you know, who you are and never have heard Bob Dylan sing a song?" And he said, "I haven't." And it just is equally shocking to me, right? So that just sort of turned my whole thought about that piece around in that instance, knowing that he hadn't heard Dylan sing that at all. So, all right, 2-part question, right? Who wants to go?
What are the questions again?
Sorry. So 2 parts, right? Who are you excited about now? What are your 3 biggest influences in your life on your music?
Oh, wow. I guess I'll start. I'm excited about Speedo. Yes. And I'm excited about Yannick Nézet-Séguin and Angel Blue as well. Yannick in particular because of where he is taking modern orchestra and how he is connecting with composers in such a way that it is a living collaboration that we haven't seen the likes of in, you know, hundreds of years. So that is really, really it's special to see. I'm excited about Speedo because of his technique, his vocal technique. And his ability, even though his voice cuts through everything, it's just incredible to see. I was at your first rehearsal of Fire Shut Up in My Bones, the first stage rehearsal, and I just noticed that your technique really spoke for itself. In the midst of all the complex rhythms and orchestration, your rhythms and your words cut through so clearly with effervescence, and it had a lot of warmth and resonance, all the things that you strive for in your performances. So that is really, really exciting to see. My influences are Muhammad Ali. I grew up in his neighborhood. And, you know, you gotta learn how to talk smack in order to survive in West Louisville. So I grew up around that kind of vibe. The church, of course, that is the language that I think we have all in common up here on this stage when we write. You know, it's very apparent in our articulations. It's very apparent in our rhythms, and it's very apparent within our harmonic structures. And that is something that I just feel like you guys are my brothers, and I'm just I'm in awe of all of you and being in your presence here. So Muhammad Ali's that big focal point for me. And let's see, what was the other thing? Influences. I'll tell you what did influence me, and it's not a positive thing, It is my undergraduate years of going to a school that was mostly white men, all white men composers, who made me feel like, because I was a black woman, that I had no place in the composition world. And it took me a decade, long after I had graduated, to believe that I was a composer. I was still writing, but somehow or another, the word composer did not associate with the actual act of writing, but rather a profile. And so, having said that and having overcome that, it is my own personal mission to write the heck out of something, first and foremost, but to also set an example and encourage those who dare try to break out the labels that people try to put on them. So those are my influences.
Preaching. Okay, so it was 3. One more time. So
Yeah,
Okay, so
I only
three
gave 2,
influences
so
on
you know.
your- 3 influences on your music, your life, right?
3 influences for me. A big one is travel, getting my passport and getting gone, because it frees
Yes.
up my spirit in order to be able to even begin to engage with the art of creation. There's a freedom in just packing a bag and getting that passport stamped and getting gone. Also, other influence in my writing, I would say the Metropole Orchestra, because a lot of the work that they do is just, it's so beyond anything we think of regarding genre, and I'm just here for the tearing down of those barriers. And another thing that informs my work would be my educational upbringing. I'm 100% a product of music education, and just the fact that I noticed that, like, we did that kind of music here and that kind of music there, and I don't understand why. So I've always asked why. The reason that Come Sunday exists is because it should have existed like 100 years before me. It seemed like the most obvious piece in the world to write. Hello? And nobody did it, and that's for issues of representation. That's a whole different conversation. But that's the most obvious piece in the world to me. So right now, I'm just in this moment where I'm like, well, what else is super obvious to me that doesn't exist? And so that's what I've been working on. And
Who excites you listening now?
Esperanza Spaulding.
Yeah.
She's a force of nature. Esperanza, what she's doing, Billy Childs, what he's doing, Terence Blanchard, what he's doing, you know, all these people who come from this like deep jazz and black music tradition who are now on these concert stages, writing these operas and these film scores and doing these really experimental projects. I'm just like, yeah, absolutely.
How many out there, show of hands, don't know Billy Childs?
Wait, don't know.
Don't know. Don't know. Okay. You have some homework tonight.
All right, good to know. I'm going to do my homework. So the 3 things that influenced my career are my 4th grade elementary school teacher and her husband, who became a high school principal of my arts education. Their names are Elizabeth and Leon Hughes, and these are a white family from southeast Virginia in Yorktown, Virginia, and I was in special ed, and Elizabeth Hughes was my elementary school teacher, and I was put in there for being a really bad kid. Like, I was kicked out of basically 3rd grade, and so they put me in this class with her, from the special ed class for the worst kids, and she taught me more about why I was in. She was the first person that wasn't black who taught me that I was special, and that was big for me then, because in my neighborhood where I grew up, it was a very bad neighborhood. A lot of kids went into the court system, judicial system, and the first day of class, this little white woman, taught me about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and made every kid in her little elementary school class, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, didn't matter. After the Pledge of Allegiance, we had to recite the "I Have a Dream" speech by Martin Luther King every day. And she wanted everybody in her class to know that you wouldn't be judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. And even though I was in 4th grade and I didn't really get it, I thought it was extra special that she put a black person on her wall, and she taught me about how special I was, and how special my people were, and how important we were to America and American history. And so Mr. Hughes later on became the reason why I got into music school. In 8th grade, all I could do was sing the Star Spangled Banner, but somehow I got into the best art school in Virginia. I'll let you figure out how I got in. But ironically, before I got
Read
into
the book.
Yeah, before I got into the school, Mr. Hughes had created an initiative, basically like the musical version of a certain amount of people, the representation of the community. The representation at government school had to be presented by the ethnic representation in the community. So basically, 30% of government school had to be black. No matter how talented they were, they had to be black, because that's what our community was. And nobody's going to support something that doesn't have representation. And so someone like me, who had very little musical talent, but I auditioned, and that was something, you know. I had to put myself out there, and they took me, and I became basically the best product they've ever produced. and that goes to show representation matters. And so the second thing that motivates me is as I mentioned, the judicial system. The court system in America motivates me in my career. The judicial system in America is flawed to the utmost degree since the civil rights movement started. It's destroyed families, homes, including mine. And at 12 years old, I was told that I'm useless, and I was thrown in jail. And I spent a summer of my life locked up at 12 years old. And 2 years later, I was singing opera. And literally, opera is the only thing that kept me off the streets. So when I say, like, opera is the most important thing to me, and it's what motivates me, what gets me up in the morning, it's created my entire life. The reason why I exist, the reason why I'm a citizen of the world, is because classical music gave me an outlet for my pain, for my suffering, for my love, everything. And then the third thing is my wife. My wife motivates me. The last thing I want to do is not ever have her not believe in me or think I'm amazing. And that means more to me than anything. Like, having her support me and feel proud of me, I feel like I can do anything, that I can overcome anything. Those are three things that motivate my career. As far as people that I think are really amazing in my field, I would say there's a singer named Lisa Davidson, who is a soprano. She's again, I only think purely opera. I know nothing about R&B or gospel or anything like that. My wife knows more than I do. And I will tell you, I was at a hotel in Houston, and there's a little short black guy, older black guy in the elevator, and he was like, "Man, you're tall." And I was like, "Man, you look familiar." And he's like, "Yeah, my name is Kirk Franklin." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I walked out, and I told my wife I met some guy named Kirk Franklin, and she was like, she literally was I think she was gonna divorce me. That's how little I know about the community, but I'm learning. And so Lisa Davidson she's 35 years old. She's a soprano from Norway, and I think she's the single most important operatic voice in the world. And I'd say to the world, we have to protect her, because if she's not even in her prime vocally, and so if she stays healthy and well, she could be the greatest recorded Wagnerian Strauss singer in the history of all of opera. That's it.
So my influences that really helped me kind of on my path, I think the first one would be one of my high school teachers named Miss Howard. She was a speech teacher at my school, and so I worked with her, from my freshman year to the end of my senior year, because I grew up with a speech impediment and had to work through being able, to talk. I couldn't really communicate the way that I wanted to, and I think that's why music, I was really drawn to that, because inside a musical environment, I feel like I could do anything. And she was the one that helped me to be able to do what I can do now. And I came into those times with her and just was very frustrated. Like, why can't I do this? Why can't I break through this wall? But I can do all these other things. And she was the one that really helped me to be able to, to overcome that major roadblock in my life. So I owe a lot to her, just for taking a chance on me. The second person I would say would be composer Gabriella Lena Frank, who is one of my dear mentors and was able to really help me just come out of my shell in a lot of ways and pushed me to write music that I didn't think I could, you know, more in the contemporary vein, but also like more personal to me. And I think her teaching has really helped to shape kind of the course of where my writing has gone in the last few years or so. And then the last influence is a bit more personal, and it's actually my childhood friend. We grew up together in the church that I was in, and were really good friends for many years until he was unfortunately killed when I was a sophomore. And he had dreams of wanting to be a film director and a producer, and I had dreams of wanting to be a composer. And so we had this idea that we were going to collaborate together and make our dreams come true. So now that he's not here, it's like I feel this like he's with me in everything I do and in my music and in just where my life has been. And so I take him, you know, with me everywhere I go, and hopefully we'll see if our dreams can come true. And then the three people I'm really excited about, Kendrick Lamar. I'm a huge fan of Kendrick Lamar. Anyone who knows me knows, like, I know like pretty much every album, every EP, you know, from Section 80 to now. And so I'm waiting on him to drop this project. I'm waiting on him to just drop the album. His lyrics have just transformed my whole life and just my whole way of thinking. So I can't wait until he drops some music. The other one would be Kamasi Washington. I discovered who he was. He's a jazz saxophonist who's just, his music just blows me away, and he pushes the envelope of like what you can do with jazz and even beyond into like, you know, writing movie scores and, you know, using the orchestra and choir in these really creative ways. So I can't wait for that as well. And then the last one would be composer who's a really good friend of mine named Quinn Mason. He writes primarily for orchestra, but is just taking the classical world by storm, truly. So I can't wait until he releases more music and his name continues to grow in the classical world.
Okay, Quincy Jones. Not Michael Jackson Quincy Jones. I mean, before the Wiz Quincy Jones, like the big band Quincy Jones. The Quincy Jones I studied with Nadia Boulanger in Paris. Yes. So anything like Quincy, in fact, I was on the way in here, I was listening to the Wiz, and this always gives me some inspiration. Love Terence Blanchard. Those are my musical greatest influences, but also my mom, my grandmother. They really pushed me, you know, to be a musician, you know, and to really, as a career, you know. So they will always come with me wherever I go. Yeah, and those are the things that kind of keep me going. I love Rachmaninoff too, y'all. I really do. Anything Rachmaninoff, I love. So I'm looking forward to hearing the piano concerto. It's not my favorite one. Number 3 is my favorite. But, you know, it's all good. But yeah, those are my influences.
Y'all, Of Our New Day Begun was a total Terence Blanchard influence. Like, completely. It's completely from A Tale of God's Will. You know, the whole album that he wrote for the Hurricane Katrina, him being from New Orleans, and the score that he wrote for Spike Lee's documentary, When the Levee Spoke, that's literally what I was trying to channel when I wrote that piece.
Is this publicist paying us for this?
I know,
This is
right?
crazy. This is crazy. How much?
Drop y'all's cash out.
That's insane. Is he? I hope he's watching this. He's a clip of this, y'all.
Record it.
Ask us stuff.
Questions,
Yeah.
y'all. Yeah,
Yes.
questions? I know you have questions.
Right, I'm done. We're not being shy up in here. Come on.
I'm going to point at y'all in a second.
Oh, over here.
Do you guys have an interest in writing like solo repertoire, or what's your experience with that?
Solo rep.
I do. Yeah, I love writing for solo instrumentation. It kind of puts you in a place where you can be disciplined. Solo strings, over the pandemic, I wrote like a set of solo string works. What the good thing about strings, you can do double stops and stuff like that, but an instrument like flute, you have to be focused because I play piano, so I'm always thinking about harmony, but with an instrument like where you can only play one note at a time, it's really difficult. And to keep the attention, keep it engaged. To answer your question, yes, I love writing for solo instruments. And actually, that's one of the things that kind of kept my catalog alive during the pandemic, just because, on large ensembles, it wasn't a thing, so you couldn't get a group of 80 people together because of the restrictions. So a lot of people played my solo works and chamber works.
A plug for Carlos's Move It for solo flute. That came out a couple of years ago.
During the pandemic, yeah.
During the pandemic, it is a killer piece.
Oh gosh, thank you.
I have to say too, as far on the other end of speaking of Terence again, I think as far as an opera is concerned, or a piece that has a voice in it, when an audience member goes who's not a non-instrumentalist, especially if you're a vocalist, you go into a show wanting to leave humming something. And I think, even me, who has very little experience with pure instrumental music, when I go to see a concerto, blah, 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 a sonata, something like this, the line that I leave humming is a solo line. Like, it's somewhere in the orchestra. And even in a jazz ensemble, I don't leave humming the jazz ensemble piece. I leave humming the melody that goes through the different pieces, the basis of the whole piece. And so in opera, I think, Puccini. Do you guys know what Puccini is? Like, do you know the opera Madame Butterfly? Madame Butterfly? Do you know the opera La Boheme? What do you think? Which one is more memorable? Be honest. Most people would say La Boheme. And even though most opera fanatics would tell you that Madame Butterfly is the better opera, a normal person, a person who's going to see a show would say that that La Boheme is extremely memorable. You leave La Boheme humming stuff. And I think that's a goal. As me as a listener, when I go see a piece, if it's especially a brand new one that I've never heard, that I leave humming something, And that's really hard nowadays because a lot of modern pieces, especially ones that are atonal as heck, it's really hard to leave humming something, especially Philip Glass. Oh, I love Philip Glass. People love it. But for me, it's about getting that one scene. And Terence, oh my God, does he have that in Fire and Shutter My Bones? So many.
Did you have a follow-up, John?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on that question and ask about solo percussion repertoire. Like, if any of you have an interest in that or have written for solo percussion.
For the live stream, the question's about solo percussion repertoire.
I have a percussion trio.
Same.
Yeah, anything's possible at any point.
Hi. Yeah. So you all talked a little bit about who has influenced you and how. I was wondering if some of you could talk a little bit about who you want to influence and how you want to influence them.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Okay. When I am in the audience at a performance, at a residency, and a piece like Come Sunday is being performed, I always try to find if there's an old black person in the audience, because I want to know what the hell they think about the music. I'm really not interested in what anybody else thinks because they know that stuff. And so if they can predict the music, and I've seen it, I've seen that grandmother who knows what's going to happen, I feel like my job is done. Okay, so those are the people I feel like that I try to reach with certain pieces. Also, with a piece like Mother of a Revolution, I've had so many queer kids come up to me and say, I never thought I would feel so seen as a trans person playing in band before. And I promise you that if I'm given the mic, I'm going to go up on stage and I'm going to talk to that audience before the piece. And I'm going to say from my whole chest exactly what that piece is about, and I'm going to look them in their eye while I do it. Especially to the point where we've criminalized people's existences. So I'm looking, I get the most amazing emails and messages from people who have heard that piece, or who have heard of Our New Day Begun, who have heard, and so like for me, all I want to do is I want to create the kind of music that a student in that ensemble, Maria Schneider's music did this for me, they're just like, I didn't even know that this was allowed. I didn't know this was possible. So now that I know that I can be this authentic with what I do, then I'm going to go forth and do the same thing. So that if I can give another musician permission to be authentic, that's like my whole jam right there.
Anyone else? Next question?
Oh, behind you.
Oh.
So you talked a little bit about collaboration, but how have you actually met and gotten connected to your closest collaborators, people you've worked with over and over? The behind-the-scenes version, perhaps.
Oh, wow.
Do you want to hear from the artist end or the composer's end? What's more important? Probably the composer.
Both perspectives, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's I will say on my end, I never thought when I got into Fire Struck My Bones that I would be that. This is hard to say this because I never thought my voice would be important in the show, and that's a tough way to feel about yourself as an artist. I was first of all, I wasn't the first choice to be in the show, and I knew that my part was a part that was supposed to be written for another singer who I admire, and I basically was stepping in because of special circumstances, and I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I was just happy to be there, and also when I first went to the first rehearsal, and one of my colleagues / kid I've known since he was 12 years old. We went to the same high school, by the way, Will Liverman. He was Charles in Fire Struck My Bones, the lead character. And once he started singing, and the style which he sings in, because at 12 years old he was running his church, the music department of his church, his father's church. And so I immediately felt like I don't belong in this opera because I don't have that kind of sound. And I couldn't do runs like he could do runs, and LaTanya Moore, who could do anything, was doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and Angel Blue, who could do anything, was all doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have to come in and sing in my voice, which is not a quote-unquote black voice, which I've heard my whole life. And it's kind of the opposite end. Like I expected, when I first started singing, that I would be supported pursuing this kind of classical field by the black community. But where I grew up in the black community I was in, they called me Oreo and made fun of me. And so I always felt like an outcast amongst my own people for a long time. And when Terence approached me, after the first rehearsal to talk to me, and was asking me what I'm doing, what I'm singing, I felt I didn't know how to respond. I was like freaking meeting the president. And then when I got approached by the Met saying they wanted me to sing the lead in his next opera, and that he wanted to work with me to make sure that it was fit for my voice, it blew me away. And I didn't know that it goes to show you that you have to, as you said, be free to be yourself. I couldn't pretend to be something that I wasn't. And I think that helped with the collaboration with the composer. The composer will see that if you sing it your way, your voice, or perform it with your voice, they have to see it. They're artists.
You're all talking about Terence Blanchard, and I just want to say briefly that I met him 20 years ago backstage at a Pittsburgh Symphony concert, and he talked to me, didn't know me from Adam. He talked to me like I was the only person that mattered to him in his life at that time. And I think all of you here on the stage, you have that in common with him. And we've gotten to know some of you already this week, and Terence Blanchard, of course he's a genius, but you're all geniuses too, and you're not just genius, you are outstanding citizens of the world. And that's the thing that struck me the most about him, and it's what strikes me so much about all of you here with us this week. And of course, I got to do his Requiem for Katrina a few years ago, and that was, an unbelievable experience. So I know why you're all piling on with him. Next question.
Actually, sorry to say, our time has come to an end. We have a rehearsal starting, and the conductor in me is like, I gotta get every minute in. So we have 9 minutes to reset the stage and get to a rehearsal. So I want to say one thing though. I've been turned off. I wanted to say one thing. For the composers in the audience, one of the things that I've thought a lot about this week, and as I thought about all of these people coming in, is there's very few composers that I know that make crossover work, that are able to infuse things in a way that's truly authentic. And that word has come up a lot today, authentic. And so as I listen to their music, I'm trying to figure out, why is that authentic? What about that is making the light go green for me? Like, this works. And there's a lot of music that I listen to that tries to, that doesn't work. I don't know the answer, but I do know where it's working. And you'll hear that on Friday and Saturday night in the performances of the music that we're performing. It's just something that I think about a lot, and was drawn to the music that you all write for that very purpose. So authentic is the word that I'm going to walk out with today.
Does everyone know Speedo's singing tomorrow night?
Ryan Speedo-Greene's singing tomorrow night, Thursday night in Millard. The rest of us will be on display on Friday and Saturday. And for those of you composers, if you want to wait around and hang around for 2 hours, you'll get to hear all of this music in rehearsal. Anything else? Can we thank all of them for coming?